Welcome to the Too Much Woman channel, where we speak the truth that most people are too scared to say out loud. Today's conversation is not surface level. It's not performative, but it is an invitation for you to drop down into your body and into the emotional patterns that are running the show, quietly, unconsciously, and completely. I'm sitting down with Ricki Davimes, founder of the Human Potential Company. A man who helps reveal and transcend the limiting mental narratives that confine you, so that you get to show up in life, emotionally fully expressed, while exploring greater possibilities. If you've ever felt like you're too much, too emotional, or just disconnected with your own fire, this one's for you. Let's dive in. I'm sitting down with Ricki Davimes. Have I said that right, Ricki?
Close, Davimes.
Davimes.
But I'll take it.
Excellent. The founder of the Human Potential Company. Ricki, thank you for joining me.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
I would like to welcome you as the first man on the Too Much Woman channel. So welcome.
I feel blessed. Thank you.
Ricki, if you had to describe what you do, what is it? What do you do?
Right. So when I first got into this work, I came from the perspective of life coaching, really helping people get to where they want to be in the most simplest form. To sort of describe it. But what I actually realized, I don't really do life coaching itself, because what I find is life coaching is very much oriented around goals, and focusing on the kind of actions that people can take to get to their goals, and then holding them accountable to that. What I recognized is what actually holds people back is these much deeper subconscious, the sort of subconscious ways that they relate to themselves, to other people, and to life, that have them showing up in the world, with a particular sort of personality. And that personality really defines the way that they think, the way that they behave, and therefore the results that they get in their life. So the kind of work that I do is really by listening to where people are at in life, the sort of problems or issues that are presenting on the surface. I really help them backtrack into, well, what are the deeper sort of conversations that are going on beneath the surface, such that they give rise to a particular experience of life, right? And because they're having that kind of experience, they see a particular world of possibility for themselves, and therefore they create a life within those possibilities that they see.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I help people identify where it is that they effectively having these sort of limiting conversations in their head that they might not even be aware of, so that we can free them from those, and then ultimately that would give rise to a much greater sense of possibility and potential in life. So really, it all works by trying to bring the subconscious narratives to the surface, so that ultimately people get to break free from those.
Great. I love that. I'd love to go into more detail, but let me ask you, was there a moment in your life where you realized that you were disconnected from your own emotions?
Where I was disconnected from my own emotions, I think it's a great question. I think for me, for a long time, I was really on the treadmill of chasing success, and success in the way that it's sort of very typically defined in our society and culture, where it's, climbing corporate ladders, or, I wasn't necessarily building my own business, but I was in the startup world, really just climbing the ladder, trying to make my way to some sort of top, right? And to be honest, I'd never really thought about, very consciously about, well, what is the actual life that I want? It was just sort of this path that I'd found myself on, based on the sort of environment that I was raised in, where it was very much about promoting success and building a successful career, and then going on to university and studying, and then just, finding myself in this very corporate sort of space where that's the norm, right? And I was just playing the game. So emotions weren't really a thing for me, right? It's like I was just showing up to that and doing what I thought needed to be done to get ahead. to get somewhere effectively. But there was a point where, there was a very pivotal moment, sometime in about 2017 for me. I read The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. And it's a funny book, but for whatever reason, it planted a seed. Um, and a few months later, I was watching an episode of Chef's Table, and it's a beautiful series on Netflix about these chefs that, obviously it's about the chefs and the food, but it's really about the culinary artistry behind it.
Mm.
And for me, what that really represented was someone showing up in absolute integrity to their art. What they were doing was a real expression of who they are.
Mm.
And there was a particular episode, there's a particular episode in one of the seasons where there's a Korean monk who she cooks food for the monastery. And, for whatever reason, there was a moment in it where something pierced through, and it really showed me, it reflected back to me where I was so out of integrity with who I am. Like, just really, I had no sense of who I actually am beneath the sort of narratives and the roles that I was showing up in the world as.
Mm.
And that sent me into a panic attack. Um, and without going into, all the details, but that was just like months of very crippling anxiety and recurring panic attacks and trips to emergency rooms thinking I was having a heart attack. And that was the sort of moments, I guess, some people go through these sort of like awakening moments. I wouldn't necessarily describe it as that. Um, but it did get me to start asking much bigger questions of myself, right? And I guess that was the start of me really diving into all the sort of programming that I'd accumulated over my years, and growing up, and that the period after that, going into the working world. And it really just was a moment of sort of slowing down and pausing to reflect on, well, what is the kind of life that I actually consciously want to create?
Mm.
And then from there, it was just a process of really diving into who I am. What are the patterns that I've been playing out unconsciously? And yeah, I guess the work, sort of just evolved from that.
First-hand experience, eh?
Yeah, very much so.
Mm. Like with all of us.
Look, I don't think you can really get into this work and really have a very meaningful impact on other people if there isn't that first-hand experience. And I
Mm.
guess, I guess that's why, the hard times are really blessings because they give us the experience that help us relate to other people even more deeply, right? Because if we've been there, you can really understand what someone else might be going through.
Mhm.
So for me, it was a really challenging time, but it was the biggest blessing as well. So yeah, it's incredible how these things work.
Love it. So, I'm going on a little bit of a different track here. If you had to give someone advice, with, let's say, apologizing for their feelings, especially when the big messy ones, how do we stop apologizing for our big messy feelings?
How do we stop apologizing for the big? Yeah, it's a big question, right? And I guess, the what comes through me immediately is you don't, right? Because again, like I said a bit earlier, I'm not so concerned about the actions, right? Like I'm not the kind of person that turns up and works with someone and gives them instructions on what to do,
Mm.
right? What I'm really interested in is what's going on beneath the surface such that it has you showing up as someone who feels like they have to apologize in the first place, right? Because, I can sit here and work with someone and tell them, just don't apologize. Just like feel okay with whatever you're feeling. But until the programs underneath the surface actually shift,
Mm.
that sort of give like an automated rise to the kind of actions that we take in the world, like it happens automatically. No one, no one sits there thinking, "Oh, I should be someone who apologizes for the way that I feel," right? Like it's not a conversation that goes on in our head. No, it happens automatically. So what we want to get to is, what are the sort of deeper subconscious patterns and narratives that are happening under the surface that, again, the person might not be aware of. We want to interrogate those, and we want to investigate whether they actually are true.
Mm.
For someone who, feels like they need to apologize, my guess is there's something, maybe there's something there to do with a bit of like a sort of safety, right? So someone growing up in a household where maybe the father or the mother was a bit mercurial, right? They were a bit off, and when they got angry, that was a very scary time for the child, right? And I'm speaking to an adult, but their
Mm.
time as a child growing up in that household. So they learned, well, this isn't a safe environment, right? And so instead of instead of feeling free to just be them in that household, they learned that they have to be quite vigilant, right, to the parents, their caretakers in this instance. But they learned to monitor their parents' reactions, how their parents were feeling, and right, and then they took that on,
Mm.
such that they felt that they had to be the ones to then monitor themselves, right? So what they're really trying to avoid is reliving a very scary experience from the past, and having that reoccur. So my guess is, and obviously without getting into the detail, because everyone has their own sort of specific story. But to help someone stop apologizing for the way that they're feeling and their emotions, it's just getting beneath the surface what's going on. In that particular instance, my guess is it probably has something to do with the feeling of unsafety in your environment.
Mm.
Like, it's not okay to just be me.
Mm. So, what you're saying is that you're not so much concerned with the emotion. Is that what you're saying?
No, I think the emotions are very good indicators, right?
Mm.
So we can look at emotions, and the sort of two primary emotions that people tend to experience is they either feel hurt or they feel scared, right? And often people feel both at the same time. And so we can use those as indicators, right? But what I'm saying is, um, it doesn't help to stay in the realm of emotions and to just work around that, right? For me, it's an indicator of something that's happening beneath the surface.
Mm.
So if you think about how human experience happens, right? We have these deeper subconscious patterns. Like, we all think we are someone. We all have this concept of an I in our head, right? And that's all defined by the ways that we got characterized as children, or the way that we decide who we decided we were based on the experiences that we had.
Mm.
And based on who we were, that gives rise to the kind of thoughts that we have. And the kind of thinking that happens in our head then gives rise to the kind of feelings and emotions that we have. So again, just for me, concentrating on the emotions itself, it's sort of too far down the line of how the whole process happens, right? Because it's like the third or the fourth step.
Mm.
Does that make sense? So what I'm interested in is, okay, someone's feeling a certain way.
Mm.
Well, then what must their thinking be? And then what does their thinking say about the way that they see themselves relative to their environment? So someone might show up and they might have this question like, how do I stop apologizing for the way that I feel, or my emotions, which is a very valid, right? That's a very valid thing for someone to show up with. And it's not that we don't want to give credence to that. Like, we honor the way that people feel, right? But we don't want to stay there.
Mm.
It's not just about changing the emotion. It's about backtracking. Okay, well, what must that person be saying about themselves, or what must they be thinking about themselves in relation to the environment, such that it gives rise to that kind of emotion?
Mm.
Does that
So
make sense?
it does, but a lot of people bypass or avoid emotion completely,
Absolutely, yeah. And
which
again, that might be a survival strategy, because feeling those emotions felt very unsafe in the environment that they were in. So again, if someone grows up and they were told that, like, the way that you feel is not important, like, stop being so much, all those the narratives that children take on in the families that they grow up in. So we hear all these sorts of things, and then often someone will adapt to that by then suppressing. Oh, it's not okay to feel that way in this environment.
Mm.
So that then disconnects us from the way that we're feeling.
Mm. But surely there's a cost to suppressing and avoiding your emotion.
Absolutely, yeah. There's definitely a cost to what you see. What people are actually suppressing is feeling. This is so
Mm.
the way that I would put it. People are suppressing their feelings, and that suppressed feeling then becomes an emotion. So I do make that slight. I distinguish the two, right? There's
Mm.
feelings, the way that we feel hurt or we feel scared. But when we shove that down, that becomes trapped emotion in the body.
Mm.
So yes, that for me is where the cost is, because there's that accumulated emotion that over time can manifest in the body.
Mm.
Um, and then, we see it showing up as diseases, cancers,
Mm.
autoimmune type situations. But yes. So I mean, just to make the point again and to really stress it, we as humans are not, especially in Western cultures, we're not very good at feeling. Like, in fact, I would say that we probably need to learn to feel even more than we do.
Mhm.
It's not about pushing the feeling away. It's like, actually, you should feel it even more,
Mhm.
right? But what I'm really interested in the work that I do is just helping the person get to what is happening beneath the surface that keeps giving rise to that.
Mm.
Because what people don't realize, right? We all have difficult circumstances in life. Like no one has a plane like smooth sailing, right? Like every day we human. It's part of what being human means, right?
Mm.
I can't remember what tradition it is, but they say to be human is to suffer, right? So we have challenges in life. Like every day, everyone will have at least one challenge that they face. Um, the thing is that your problem is never really in the circumstance that you're dealing with. It's how you're relating to it.
Mm.
So yes, someone may have grown up in a family where it lacked a sense of security. They weren't able to be themselves and express those feelings, right? But now they show up in the workplace, and they still repeating the same patterns that they developed as a child, but in a totally different context.
Mm.
And when a child is feeling very scared, it's very appropriate for them to then suppress their emotions. But as an adult, it becomes totally dysfunctional,
Mm.
right? It's no longer appropriate to show up in the same way as that child learned to cope, right? And that doesn't mean it's not okay. It's just not appropriate if you want to show up as a powerful human being and really explore your sort of potential and possibility in the world.
Mm.
So again, like, feel the feelings, but we want to backtrack into what is the sort of deeper narrative. I'm not safe. There's something wrong with me. Those kind of narratives, and we want to then help the person break free from them.
Mm. I love where this is going, because from my point of view, if you feel your feelings, it actually brings relief. Does
It
that
does. Yes,
yeah. But like you
it
say,
does.
you've got to backtrack. I want to ask you this. What are the signs that you've seen, Ricki, that are basically chronic fight or fright? Sorry, let me say that again. Flight or fight,
Fight or flight.
and
Yes.
and the person isn't even aware of it.
Yeah. That's a really good question. What are the chronic signs of fight or flight? It might sound a bit flippant. I would say that most people are in at least a subtle state of fight or flight, right? Because as long as you're living in some subconscious narrative or pattern that is in some way based in a form of limitation, like I'm not something, right? Like you feel like you aren't good enough,
Mm.
you're too much, I'm not safe, there's something wrong with me.
Mm.
These are all very limiting ways of relating to ourselves and to other people and to the world around us, right? So as long as someone is living in that kind of world, right, that world of limitation, there is going to be some form of fight or flight within their system,
Mm.
right? And this really speaks to the nervous system, right? So when someone's feeling stressed or they feel somehow limited or inadequate or whatever that might be, right? So that means that the sympathetic part of their nervous system is going to be activated, which is that fight or flight response. And that's when the person's going to be dumping all the stress hormones into the body, like cortisol, adrenaline, and so forth.
Mm.
So the signs, if you want to just get really practical, it might be very shallow breathing, like breathing up here at sort of the top half of their torso, like in their throat, instead of like the more deep, like guttural sort of belly breaths, which are
Mm.
associated with a state of relaxation.
Mm.
So that's definitely one sign. But the other physical signs can be very sort of subtle. Someone's eyes, like they might be darty, like looking around, scanning the room because they learned to be vigilant to stay safe.
Mm.
So I think many people can probably relate to that, right? Like they're constantly scanning. And
Mm.
when you learn to spot these things, you instantly see it, right? Like when I first started recognizing these things in other people, it was like, wow,
Mm.
we don't even realize like what's going on. And then I started seeing it. It's like this is insane because I can in some ways tell more about a person's world than they might actually realize.
Mm.
Because when it becomes so normal, it's like the fish in water. You don't know, it doesn't know it's in water. So people just think it's normal to
Mm.
walk around the world constantly feeling on edge, constantly feeling like they like there's this sort of like background vigilance, always scanning for any form of danger.
Mm.
And this is, unfortunately very prevalent in women, this absence of feeling secure in the world. So I would say that the signs can be very subtle. They can be a lot more pronounced. Um, but yes, like I said earlier at the beginning, most people are at least to some extent in a state of fight or flight.
Mm. So we all need to come and see you, Ricki.
That would be amazing for my business. Yeah. Uh,
Tell
the
me,
waiting list, I'll put it out there.
excellent.
Yeah.
Why do so many women in particular, I'm not disregarding men, but obviously this
Yes.
channel is for
Yeah,
women.
your audience is more women, yeah.
So why do so many of us feel flat, tired, or emotionally unavailable to ourselves?
Right. Yeah. It's a great question. And the truth is because in very subtle ways, most people are denying themselves, right? Because the truth of who you are is that you are this very expanded, limitless being, you know? There's this infinite potential to who you are. But then you grow up in environments or you have certain experience as a child or, typically sometimes later on in life, people go through things. And then based on those experiences, you decide something about yourself. So, very, very practical example, someone takes a report home after school, the term ends, they take their report home and they show their parents. And for maths, they got a B, and the dad says, well, you could have got an A.
Mm.
And in that moment, it's not just a conversation that happened. No, that actually meant something about you, right?
Mm.
So maybe the person decides, oh, I'm not enough,
Mm.
right? So now, and so you take that on, right? And then you continue to find evidence such that it actually becomes who you are. So it's not just an event that happened once and then you move on. No, a child might take that on and it actually becomes their identity. So now instead of living at this more limitless, that sort of limitless nature of who you really are, you can speak to the soul, your spirit, or whatever that might be, right? However you want to think about it. But just like the true essence of you, right? But now all of a sudden you're wrapped up in this very confining language. I'm not enough. There's something wrong with me. I'm not safe. And that's then the perspective that you walk around the world from.
Mm.
Right. So if someone's living in such a sort of limiting perspective and narrative about who they are going to experience the world from a place of limitation. from a place of being withdrawn, from a place. Do you understand what I'm saying? So for me, it's a very natural byproduct of these deep-seated sort of beliefs and narratives that we have about who we think we are. And that then defines and characterizes who you get to show up in the world. So someone thinking that there's something wrong with me, they're not going to show up in the world fully open, fully available to life and the people around them. No, they're going to be more closed off. They're going to be more sort of defensive, right? They're going to be withdrawn from people. They're not going to be able to be fully expressed and put themselves out there because there's always that threat that they might be judged, right? Or that they might do something wrong. So for me, it always comes back to what is the conversation that's going on in that person's head that gives rise to the experience of life that they have and how they show up.
So you're saying that is actually it's an energy drain when they're closed.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, because it takes a lot of effort to sustain these very false narratives about who we are. You know, and going back to speaking about the nervous system. Again, if someone is living in a sort of false idea of who they are, I'm not enough, there's something wrong with me, I'm not safe. I'm just giving some examples here. Again, that's going to have the more sympathetic side of the nervous system activated, which is the fight or flight. But that requires a huge amount of energy, because if you think about how we evolved as humans, and you see it in animals, right? They get that fight or flight response. There's a huge dump of stress hormones into the body so that the animal can run away, get away quickly. But typically then, so the buck runs away from a lion, they get away, and then very quickly they can regulate themselves. They come back to a sort of baseline. You know, it's actually amazing when you see it. You see a buck run away and the lion stops chasing them, and it doesn't take very long and they're totally calm. Like nothing even happened. Right? And they're already grazing on the grass. But for humans, for whatever reason, it doesn't work that way, right? Like we get trapped in these very insidious narratives that can be very difficult to spot. But you know, when we show up to life in that way, that the sympathetic part of our nervous system, again, it gets activated. That has that dumping effect of all the stress hormones, but now we're living in that state chronically, right? So that takes a huge amount of resource from the body to keep in that state. And over time, that's, you know, there's that feeling of dis-ease that we have. We've all experienced it, that feeling of dis-ease, right? And then over time, there's so much accumulation of that in the body, it becomes disease. So whether that's like cancer or chronic fatigue or whatever that might be, you know, eventually it will manifest in very physical symptoms. So that's why, honestly, you know, in my opinion, it's that resistance to life in the way that it is that has people feeling so drained of their energy, of the vital sort of life force that always wants to flow, but we keep blocking it because we're in these states of stress and anxiety.
Yeah, we don't have the calm after the.
No. No. Until such time that you actually realize, like, oh, wow, you know, I keep on getting stressed when my boss asks to have a conversation with me, right? But that's only because I'm still relating to life from the perspective, like, I don't want to do anything wrong or it's not safe. So when they ask to have a conversation, your mind's already running this loop about what's going to happen. Am I in trouble? Am I going to get fired? Right? Right? So we can all relate. It's like we've all had our own experience with this kind of thing. But most people are so trapped in it, never questioning why it actually arises and not realizing that they actually live in that state 24/7, constantly tired, constantly drained of their energy, not realizing why they can't sort of give birth to the sort of life that they actually want to create in the world, because they're actually living life on defense. Yeah. So I hope that helps.
It does. What is your view, Ricki, on emotional safety in feminine expression, and how can women create it for themselves?
emotional safety and feminine expression?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lovely question. And I'm assuming, is this in relationship, or is just, can you give me an example of what that might look like or mean?
Let's use relationship as the example. In a relationship.
Yeah, right. So a woman not feeling safe in a relationship. Yeah. So again, life meets us where we're at. Um, and I don't want to be dismissive of anyone's experience, and not to point this out, and insinuate that it's anyone's fault, right? But we tend to create circumstances that are correlated with the way that we see ourselves, right? So if someone creates a situation for themselves where they find themselves with a partner who is abusive, maybe it's physical, maybe it's emotional,
Mm-hmm.
where their partner is dismissive and doesn't honor them, we don't want to condone that kind of behavior, right? Like, it's never okay for someone to show up in that way. And so we don't condone it. But it is for us, it is for us to take responsibility in the way that, well, who am I such that I created that situation or attracted that kind of partner? Right. So that's the first part. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if someone has a very low sense of worth, it wouldn't make sense for that person to attract a partner who absolutely honors them, right? Who treats them with a sense of reverence and love and respect, because it doesn't correlate with the way that they see themselves, right? So that person's probably going to attract the partner where there is abuse, where there is shouting, where there is a absence of consideration,
Mm.
right? So you see what I'm saying? Like, we actually attract the partners who correlate with the way that we see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first part. So I would say that it's really up to the individual to take, this is where they get to do their work. How am I showing up to life?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Who am I such that I attracted that kind of partner that doesn't create the container for me to feel safe, right, in this relationship? And then really what's being asked for is the real safety that someone is looking for is not actually in their partner, right? They're looking for the safety that is within them. And this for me is when it's asking for a huge amount of acceptance, a huge amount of self-acceptance
Mm-hmm.
of yourself, right? Because, we think that what we're after is going to be found in someone out there, or it's in some circumstance. Oh, when I have a partner of this type, I'm going to feel safe. But what's really being asked for is to, again, look at the ways that you are relating to yourself, and to realize, oh, it's not actually true that I'm not safe in the world. It's not actually a truth that the world is dangerous. It might define my reality. It might be very real for someone. And again, we want to honor that. But we need to, we have to investigate these deep-seated beliefs that we have about ourselves, because it's from that place that it actually creates our experience of life.
Mm-hmm.
Again, for me, it sounds like a bit of a, I don't know what the word is, a paradox or an oxymoron. I'll figure that one out later. But it sounds counterintuitive, but often the thing that we want, we don't get it by focusing on that. It's about looking at what's blocking it, right? So I've been in men's work containers. In fact, I actually did one last year, September, and it was very, I would say, instructional in nature, right? So it gave a lot of focus on actions that need to be taken. But if someone doesn't have the sort of mental or psychological foundation for those actions,
Mm.
it can actually be very counterproductive and leave someone feeling frustrated and almost angry because it's not working,
Mm.
right? And that only sort of ends up supporting the sort of mental prison that the person is already in. So, very crass example, someone doesn't feel good enough, and then they get given an instruction to do something. So, but they're already not feeling good enough, right?
Mm.
So now on the foundation of not feeling good enough, they're now being given an instruction to go do something that maybe requires them to show up boldly and courageously. That action can be very counterproductive because that person already has a very negative view on themselves, and now they can't follow through with the instruction that they've been given. So it's only working to reinforce the very pattern that has them, that's actually blocking them from what they want. So it can become a quick spiral.
Mm.
Right. So again, for a woman to be very comfortable in a feminine expression, beautiful, right? Like which woman wouldn't want that? But what we want is, you see, that's always there. Like your feminine expression wants to flow. It wants to show itself. What we need to get at is what are those deep-seated narratives that's blocking it from arising and sort of happening more naturally.
Mm.
So what is creating the sense of insecurity of showing up in that way? You know, where's the shame coming from?
Mm.
Where's there maybe guilt? You know, um, yeah. So again, I think it's very important because it's again, like I was saying earlier, we don't want to give instructions that then leave the person feeling worse off than they actually arrived in, or than they actually arrived. Right? So we want to get beneath the surface and investigate what's actually blocking the kind of energy that always wants to express itself.
Yeah.
But because of this language that we have going on in our heads, we are the blocker to the very thing that we actually want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of the notion that of the body being a portal?
The body being a portal, right? So you mean like accessing feelings and emotional states through the body?
Yes.
And the portal to what? Like what would we be trying to get to?
So using the feelings that we've
Right.
spoken about in the body
Yeah.
as a portal to breaking free.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So in my mind, the way that I see it, there's a sort of bidirectional relationship between the mind and the body. Um, a lot of people will pay sort of very particular attention to the body itself as a way to free ourselves from these sort of limiting narratives that we have running in our head. And that is definitely one way of doing it. Um, because for sure, right? Like the feeling that manifests in the body and those emotions are linked to whatever conversation or programming is running mentally, right? So because like I said, we have this conditioning that has us thinking a certain way, and that manifests as certain feelings and stored and trapped emotions in the body.
Mm.
The way that emotions manifest, we have this concept of who we are, right? Our programming, our conditioning. That then gives rise to the kind of thinking or thoughts that we have,
Mhm.
which then gives rise to the kind of feelings and sort of emotions, our emotional state in the body, right? So by feeling that, one can then go in the opposite direction and get to, well, what is, one can maybe access the programming in that way, right? By really feeling into it and breathing through those emotions, allowing them to flow and that energy to release itself.
Mhm.
So for sure, and I've had some really profound experiences with breath work, and other forms of more somatic type practices where I felt incredible afterwards. You feel light, feel energized, you feel kind of renewed, like reinvigorated.
Mm.
So amazing, right? Like these practices are really awesome, and they can do a lot of great work for people. Um, but until you get at the conversation and the deeper sort of code that got imprinted in your mind, until you actually access that and transcend it,
Mm.
is going to continue to be that same accumulation of stuck energy and emotion as time then goes on, right?
Mm.
So if you think about if you think about a dam, I like to use analogies can be very helpful for people to just understand what I'm speaking to here. But you think about a river. So a dam will accumulate water, right? And so we can think about that water accumulation as being analogous to sort of emotions and feelings in the body, right? So we can bring all sorts of techniques to then remove that accumulation of water, right? So
Mm,
we can take buckets and we can like throw the water out, and eventually that water level will decrease if we do that enough times.
mm,
So for me, that sort of speaks to these somatic practices where we get to clear out the body of stagnant energy,
mhm,
right? But until such time that you actually remove the dam wall, right? When you stop using the bucket to remove the water, it's just going to start accumulating again.
mhm,
And in this instance, the dam wall is sort of analogous to these conversations that we have in our head. Because, like I said, you can have that sort of temporary relief. Oh, I feel incredible after that
mm,
breathwork session, or I feel incredible after whatever. You can fill in the blank, the plant medicine journey, or the meditation, or whatever it might be,
mm,
and they can work, right? But if they don't help shift the code that's in your mind, I'm not enough. There's
mm,
something wrong with me. I'm not safe. Then, as you continue to experience life, there's just going to be that continued accumulation,
mm,
right, of new feelings and new emotions that then again get trapped in the body, such that then you have to go do the breath work again. So it's for me, it's like often it becomes a thing about treating symptoms instead of getting to the root cause of what creates that stagnant energy in the first place.
mm. So, Ricki, what is a practical example of what someone can do for themselves
Yeah.
to get to that depth or to start removing that damn wall, as you've put it?
Yeah. Well, a very, very practical example is they can contact me and then I'll help them
Of
through
course.
it. It's very practical. You pick up your phone and you get in touch. But
Mm,
I'm being silly. But it's again like it's less about doing. So it's less about tips and techniques and practices. Um, because what you really want to do is start feeling into your experience of life, right? Like, how is it that you actually experience life in the world? What is the sort of conversation that you have when you're just out and about? You're in the world, but I promise you, there's this very persistent narrative and conversation that you have, and a very sort of solidified pattern in the way that you relate to yourself and other people in the general world.
mm,
So if you're someone who, you're walking down a street, um, and there's this nagging feeling like there's an absence of security. You don't feel safe, right? There might be absolutely no one around for kilometers, let's say. Like you could be, but there's still that feeling, right? Like you don't feel secure in the world.
mm,
So what you need to realize is that's not a truth because actually there's no danger. There's no one around. Like if we just had to paint this very hypothetical situation or scenario.
mm,
So you have to realize that conversation or that experience of life is being generated by you.
mm.
So if that's your experience, well, then what must I be saying in my head? What must I be thinking such that it gives rise to that kind of experience?
Yeah.
Right. So this is where you get to sort of backtrack and find the very subtle language that got imprinted in your mind, usually at a very young age. And then you get to investigate it. Like, is it an actual truth that I'm not safe?
Yeah.
Like who I am, like I am not safe. No, it's not a truth. It might feel very real. It might define my world, but it's not an actual truth that who I am is not safe in the world,
Mm,
right? And I'm sure a lot of women that listen to this can relate because sadly, most women don't have that feeling of security in the world. They don't feel safe, right? But we want to investigate that. We want to take responsibility for what's actually true versus what experience of life am I creating because of the way that I relate to life.
mm.
right? So one, if you want to make it a bit more practical, really just sit down. You can even close your eyes and meditate on it. When I was growing up, when you were growing up, what was the predominant experience that you had? Right. And I promise you, when you sit down and you think about it, everyone has some predominant experience that they had that really defined their world.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So for someone, it might be that there's something wrong with them. Like they were somehow like an anomaly, right? Or for someone, it might be that they didn't feel safe, right? Because of that mercurial nature in their family. The dad was always shouting, they would get hit, whatever it was.
Mm.
The person who always had to achieve and get great results because they thought that just being them wasn't enough. So yeah, I think that really speaks to just feeling into the experience and then really thinking like, wow, if this is the experience that I keep having for myself at a much deeper level, what is it that I'm actually saying about who I am?
Mm.
Because I promise you, when you investigate that, you realize it's not a truth. Nonetheless, it would have defined your world, however old you are, 20, 30, 40 years, right? But when you realize it's not actually true, and it's like, oh, wow, like it's not actually true that I'm not safe in the world. It's not actually true that who I am is not good enough or that there's something wrong with me. Okay, well, now you get to step into a totally different way of being in the world. And sometimes it can happen instantaneously. Sometimes it requires a bit of practice, especially when it's been there for a while.
Mm.
But I'd say for me, that is the most direct way to a much greater sense of freedom and liberation and a feeling of abundance and a feeling of, wow, there's so much more that's actually now possible for me. And if anything, I think that's really what we're all after.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wrap this up with a closing question, Ricki.
Okay.
Yes, you've got more to tell us. If there's one truth every woman listening now needs to remember, in a truth behind the noise, what would it be?
One truth. That is a big question. I can think of many things.
Pick one.
You know, I'm going to try to find something that that might speak to the majority of the audience. But I think, you know, it's very easy to to fall into the trap thinking that what we are after in life is somewhere out there, right? And that there's someone that we need to show up as or someone that we need to be in the world. And I think if there's one truth, it's all about just being you, right? It's coming back to that most natural, most authentic, most naturally expressed version of you. And it's okay and it's safe to be that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ricki. If something Ricki said lit something up in you, don't ignore it. Let it land. Let it move you. Ricki, where can people connect with you or follow your work?
Sure. I'm actually most active on LinkedIn at the moment. So if you type in my name there in the search bar, I should come up. I do have an Instagram profile, although that hasn't been very active lately, but you can always reach out on Instagram if that's your preferred sort of channel of communication. Yeah, and we can get in touch there.
I'll also leave contact details in the description below.
Great.
I created the Too Much Woman space for conversations exactly like this. This is where we get to reclaim our truth, our emotions, our wholeness without apology. So if this resonated with you, subscribe. And if you're ready to go deeper, check the links below because there's a whole world waiting for you.